Globally, 100 billion tonnes of material is mined every year for modern consumption. Today, over half the world's conventional oil reserves have been burnt up. We're rapidly running out of precious rare earth metals. The lungs of the earth, our rainforests that give us the oxygen we need to breathe, are rapidly disappearing. Because of our increasing demand for land, for palm oil, cattle ranching, ethanol, and forest products. In Ireland, every year, we generate 20 million tonnes of waste, and a huge amount of this is never recovered. If we continue on this path, we're facing a future of depleted resources.
As we build our infrastructure and economy to face the challenges of this century, we now need to make the decisions that will determine the way we're going to live in the future.
Up till now, modern society has grown in terms of consumption and waste, in parallel with economic growth. And while we all want our economy and standard of living to improve, in the current system, this will clearly lead to more irreversible damage to global ecosystems.
In this episode of EcoEye, we explore how we can continue to grow a prosperous economy, while at the same time staying within the limits of what our planet can provide. Over the last 20 years, since I started making environmental programs, a lot has changed. 20 years ago, it was argued that regulating industry to prevent pollution would stifle economic growth, but it clearly did the opposite.
Today, thanks to strong regulation, industry in Ireland is the most profitable and the least polluting it's ever been over our lifetimes. Though we've started to clean up our own backyard, we still have a long way to go. We're importing more from abroad than ever before, and everything we import today comes with a massive environmental footprint and risks of security of supply. The emerging developing world is exploding in outputs of consumer goods. This demand is driven by what we buy and then throw away. Incredibly, 80% of the products we consume are thrown away within 6 months of us buying them.
All the resources that go into disposable packaging and drinks containers get stored on shelves for maybe a week, and then they get consumed within the blip of 10 minutes.
The average Irish person produces 7 times their own weight in waste each year.
But for every tonne of household waste, 70 tonnes is produced miles away in the manufacture of all of the products we consume and then just throw away.
None of us want to create waste like this, but this throwaway society didn't happen by accident. We created it. We literally bought into the idea of the planet being a free commodity, to be exploited in any way we could imagine. And we now have to rethink everything we know and do. But there is a way of changing all of this, and it's called the circular economy. The concept is that we can live our modern lives without having to take anything new out of the ground. All the resources we use, we then reuse in a closed-loop system, mimicking nature. I met up with Dr. Jonathon Derham of the EPA to learn more about the circular economy.
So what do you mean by the circular economy?
The circular economy is this new way of thinking. We've moved from this linear approach of take, make, use, dump. And we're trying to capture materials and resources at their end of life and bring them back into the chain of utility, back into the value chain, because we just simply do not have enough natural resources to sustain the worldwide population to the future, with population numbers growing to 9 billion and beyond, for food and resources. So we've got to be much smarter, much more clever about how we keep resources moving in our economy and keep maximising their utility.
So if we can't continue with this linear approach that we've done in the past, where do we go in the future and how do we achieve these goals you're talking about?
A lot of it really rests on consumers, on the choices they make when they're going out to buy products. Now, there has to be right signals. We're all aware of the fact now when you want to go buy a washing machine, it's rated A, B, C, D, and this influences consumers, whether they want more efficient or inefficient. So we have to give consumers signals about how to assist them in making good choices.
John, as we look over the last 10, 20 years, we've consumed a lot. How unsustainable have we been and how wasteful in our use of resources have we been?
Every European uses about 16 tons of raw materials each year, over half of which we throw away. So we are very wasteful in how we consume natural resources. We are in a finite planet, yes. We know the boundaries, we know how much natural resources are out there, and we can see growing population does impact on the ability of our planet to sustain us.
Do we put enough value on resources and on materials? Or do we need to put real monetary values on these things?
Very definitely. Part of the circular economy debate is knowing the value of our natural resources. And certainly at waste as well. People don't realise the value of waste. We go and we would mine somewhere in South America a ton of rock for 5 grams of gold, But if you have a ton of old mobile phones, you have nearly 30 or 40 times more gold in a ton of phones, This is why it's important in the circular economy. There's extremely valuable resources out there that we need to capture, we need to collect. But business are involved in that, consumers are involved in that, and policymakers are involved in that.
In the circular economy, nothing is wasted, and our carbon footprint shrinks dramatically. As users, we throw nothing away. There are no waste bins in nature. In order to redesign our economy to incorporate nature's ideas, we need to rethink what waste is. First, we need to separate human and agricultural organic waste and then recycle them back into the earth system. And second, we need to recover manufactured components and recycled parts, putting them back into other businesses rather than into the ground. Plastic waste now covers over 1 million square kilometres of the Pacific Ocean in floating islands of life-choking plastic products and fine plastic particles that outweighs plankton by 6 times. 1 million seabirds and 100,000 marine animals are killed each year by plastic trash. A shocking 20% of household waste in Ireland is unaccounted for. That's 275,000 tonnes each year that could be illegally dumped or polluting our air from backyard burning.
Look at this. You can get a bag like this in every ditch, curb, roadside, beach in Ireland. This stuff is toxic when it ends up in places like this.
These man-made plastic products will eventually break down to fine particles that enter our ecosystems and eventually bioaccumulate in our food chain. This is terrible, but most of the environmental damage is done miles away and long before it gets here. An aluminium can produces 95 times its weight in CO2 and air-polluting emissions during its manufacture. Aluminium, tin and steel, the materials used to make drinks cans, are infinitely recyclable. This means they can be melted down and endlessly reused with no loss of quality in what's known as closed-loop recycling. To find out how reimagining waste as a resource can help us change our behaviour, I talked to Karen from Alu Pro, who runs Every Can Counts.
We probably have about 75% of all aluminium that was ever mined still out there. But it's getting a hold of it and making sure that it's being used to its best advantage and with the lowest possible environmental footprint. There is a program that one of the can recycling companies are using, not too far from us here in Ireland. It's in Warrington, and they have a program called the EverCan, and what they're looking to do is to have a can-to-can closed-loop recycling platform, which means that the cans that you see here today could be back on your shelf in 6 weeks' time.
And Karen, what's the benefits now of recycling aluminium cans over, say, using virgin aluminium bauxite?
Huge, huge. If you use virgin bauxite, you're using 95% more energy. If you use virgin bauxite, you're emitting 95% more carbon emissions into the atmosphere. So it's all about carbon footprinting, getting away from creating a problem, being more sustainable. So if we recycle our materials and use what we have rather than discarding it, we then don't have to mine. We don't have to take it out of the ground. We're actually using the resources that we're throwing away to produce a new thing. And aluminium is a perfect example of it. There may be others that might find that a little bit more difficult to do. But with aluminium, we can do that. We can actually demonstrate closed-loop recycling. But why should something that we can use as a resource end up in a place where it's not going to be used as a resource?
The problem is, in the linear economy, it's often cheaper to pay people in the developing world to mine more resources and pollute than it is to pay people here to collect, recycle, reuse and repair. We know from other European countries that if we add a deposit charge to a range of disposable products, like drinks containers or batteries, and this money is refunded when the product is returned, this will increase the recovery rate of these products to 95%.
Well, some good news is we now in Ireland recycle 50% of our household waste. But in a circular economy, recycling is actually the last resort.
We must ask ourselves, do we need the product in the first place? And if so, can we design a product that can be reused, repaired or upcycled? Recycling is what happens when these possibilities have been exhausted. To understand the concept of upcycling in action, I went to see one example of this at Enrich in County Meath, to meet eco-entrepreneur Tim Duggan. Here we discover how innovation can build a brand new business literally from the ground up.
Tim, tell us about your business here.
We're in the soil manufacturing business. What we do here is we take materials that previously went to landfill, make them into compost, and then use that compost to improve the quality of soil. You will see here coming in on the left-hand side, this is green garden material from local authority CA sites, recycling centres, brought here. We then shred that material to increase the surface area. We compost it for 90 days, after which we grade it. We then use that graded material to mix with soil, grit, brick, to make a range of high-quality horticultural products.
Right. So this is taking all of this in and then shreds it here.
This material would have ended up in landfill, where it would have given rise to greenhouse gas emissions and leachate, and there would have been no alternative to chemical fertilisers. So we're actually providing a dual benefit of diverting material from landfill and replacing the need for as much chemical fertilisers.
We used to dump all our food and garden waste straight into landfill. While we might think this was mimicking nature, our organic waste in landfill causes huge damage. The food we discard doesn't break down naturally, but it anaerobically decays and mixes with other pollutants, causing toxic leachate and highly potent methane gas.
You're capturing all of the nutrients that are in the material that comes in here, using that and processing it into products that can be now put back into the soil to grow plants again.
Absolutely.
It's a perfect closed loop, isn't it?
That's what we aim to do.
Just down the road at McCormack's farm, they use Tim's enriched soil to grow herbs for the health-conscious consumers in our Irish supermarkets. This was all made possible because we started separating garden waste at source.
So we would take the compost, he would blend it to his requirements, and then he used it for his rosemary, his thyme, his coriander.
Right, so he's doing all these basically herbs. Right.
And because the material we produce here has an inherent higher nutritional value, he needs to put in less artificial. So there's, as well as an environmental advantage, there's an economic saving for him. And it's, from our perspective, it's very important that we understand that we provide our customers with economic savings.
Ireland spends hundreds of millions each year on managing waste. Through our bin charges, landfill costs, and through county council clean-ups and litter wardens. Separating, collecting and recycling waste has a cost that isn't covered in the price of raw materials, because there's no charge on the environmental cost of pollution.
The cost of bin collection in Ireland ranges between about €200 and €400 per year. Most people now accept that that's necessary. But if a tiny levy was placed on all packaging and disposable products, based on a proportion of their environmental impact, it would drive producers to reduce the amount of packaging and come up with more sustainable solutions. This environmental levy would create a fund that's ring-fenced to pay for all waste management costs, so we don't have to.
And it will solve the further problem of illegal dumping and litter, and create real jobs in recycling and upcycling here at home.
The problem for waste, though, is even more fundamental, because 80% of the environmental damage is predetermined at the concept design stage.
And today, nearly all goods we buy and consume are designed to break. This is a very precise science called built-in obsolescence. Because most products like mobile phones are designed with only a 2-year lifespan, more than 500,000 of these are discarded each year in Ireland. Unfortunately, producers are still allowed to pollute for free. But if an environmental levy was placed on producers and importers of products, it would send a clear signal to them at the design stage to minimise their environmental impacts. Part of the way forward is redesigning what we consume to include the whole life cycle of what we make and how it's disposed. I met with Paul Maher of Micropro, whose game-changing thinking has been applied to his Irish-designed and made computers.
So where do you think we need to go with design and with production into the future?
Well, I think we need really to go into the past with design and design our products that have long life, so we can produce a product that is repairable, so we can extend the life of the product.
Right, so you're talking about a product that might have a life of 2 or 3 years that you could get maybe, what, 10, 20 years out of?
7 to 10 minimum, 7 to 10, and then by upgradability or repair, we can extend the life again on that product.
I believe you're the first computer in the world now to get an eco-label. How did you achieve that?
We've used wood because it's carbon capture, and also it's without plastics. We've no mercury, no plastic in it. And part of the European eco-label states you cannot have plastic more than 30 grams. So that was one of the big problems, the big challenges.
And much, much less energy, 1/3 of the energy consumption, with all these advantages. What's the difference in the cost when you go to buy a computer like this?
Typically, Duncan, it's around 15 to 20% cost difference. It's more expensive, but it's 7 to 10 years, minimum 7 to 10 years life, so you get twice as long out of it. So it's cheaper at the end of the day.
What makes the IM Eco computer unique is that it's designed with modular removable components, so it can be easily repaired and upgraded to extend its life beyond 10 years. Its electricity and CO2 are reduced by 75% compared to conventional computers, and 98% of the material used is recyclable. The problem is there's no real incentive to entice the large manufacturers to change their ways. By putting policies in place so that a levy is applied to industry at the point of sale, this will aid the transition towards a circular economy. I talked to political economist Dr. John Barry about how we can rethink this fundamental issue. You know, we're going to an age of massive consumption, and governments are promoting it. They say it's good for our economy, it generates new growth. How do we deal with that issue of consumption on the planet?
Well, that's a difficult one. I mean, there's 1 billion people on the planet that live in less than $1 a day. I think it is about not denying those people the benefits of consumption and growth and so on. We need to start designing an economy that a scientist could stand over, somebody with the basic understanding of the biophysical realities of life on a finite planet. That's our real challenge. It's a design challenge, it's an exciting, innovative challenge. It's about learning from nature, but in a way that adds to human flourishing and actually makes our lives better, more secure and healthier for now and the next generations.
How do we make the shift? You know, what's holding us back as a society?
And we need to start quickly detoxing from carbon. It's running out, it's causing climate change, it's introducing major instabilities into our economic system. Part of the circular economy is, to me, a more sharing economy. It actually makes ecological and economic sense to move to this idea of having these collective forms of consumption which divorces use and enjoyment from ownership, thereby reducing the need for people to have to pay to own individual goods and services.
So, John, from what you're saying, it appears to me that, if you like, building the circular economy will build resilience in our local communities. Is that what you mean?
Absolutely. It really is a large-scale political, cultural, and I would even say psychological shift, because our addiction to consumerism, which is effectively buying stuff you don't need to impress people you don't really care about, this has become the dominant way of life, how you demonstrate you're a good person and so on. And I think that needs a major challenge. But it is about saying to people that the circular economy is not about going backwards. It's about going forwards, it's about pro-innovation, it's about providing local jobs, it's about providing a better future for our children.
In this year's EcoEye, we've seen many projects and people that have filled me with some hope for the future. We saw the early shoots of an Irish food revolution and an emerging national pride and demand for Irish food on Irish plates. Local food production for local needs is central to a circular economy. Food production around the world faces massive problems. The vital ingredient for growing food, phosphorus, is running out. But it gave me hope to see some Irish farmers working with science to be smarter and resource efficient with how they use and recycle nutrients. In North Tipperary, we saw how local community cooperatives are investing in reducing energy demand by retrofitting buildings. And Ireland's first community-owned wind farm is a great achievement against the frustrating obstacles placed on small community ownership compared to the power of the big developer-led wind farms. In Austria, we saw how our European neighbours have already laid the foundations for a sustainable future, where town and city planning is already building a future that's free of the need of fossil fuels. We can clearly see from the very visible effects of climate change that our future is much more precarious than we previously believed it to be. Our world is now perilously close to the point of no return, and enormous changes have to be made immediately to start switching away from fossil fuels. But what gave me the most hope this year was how a fireman and his team, in their spare time, transformed their workplace to the world's first carbon-neutral fire station. This saved the station €46,000 a year, which they then used to transform neighbouring stations, now creating a €1 million a year rotating fund, which will eventually transform all of Dublin's fire stations to go completely carbon neutral. If a small group of firemen can achieve all of this in their spare time, it gives me some hope for the future in what we as a society could achieve.